invested, I'm not sure how many millions of dollars in Common Core, and the anticipation of rolling that out as our standards for education. And then we're now going to layer on top of that a temporary patchwork fix here, with the understanding that 2 years from now, we'll have a new system. So I guess the accountability question is twofold. One, in terms of funding, and how do we justify that? And the second is in terms of, I guess, continuity for students, because there are some students who are going to be, this isn't going to be, an automatic clean line. There are some students who are going to be caught in their education in the midst of this, who, everyone's not going to graduate when we start all over with a whole group of kindergartners through, 12th. So how are we going to manage those two things in terms of accountability?
Well, yeah, I think this goes back to my opening comments. Fundamentally, there has to be a decision made by the legislature, which has not been made, as to how we're going to make policy on K-12 education, this very important issue. And we've never decided that. There have been some presentations apparently to us. And so the question is this the manner in which standards and testing and the influence that they have on curriculum and textbooks, is this the manner in which we want to do that? Yeah, in 2010, if there had been a bill that came up and someone stepped and said, hey, this is how we're going to do this, we could have made a decision about that. But like many things aren't always explained with the legislature. In fact, sometimes people intentionally don't tell the legislature things. And my concern is that because we've gotten this far down the path to make the decision of, well, hey, we decided to go to Cleveland by way of Cincinnati and we're already 50 miles south, we're going to loop back up and up I-75 and over to Toledo because that's what we decided. No, let's get off the highway and go back the way that we should. And ultimately, I think that's a better way to make policy. That's the decision. And it's very difficult for folks who have been invested in the system to look up and say, wow, maybe we didn't do this right. And I happen to be reading a book about this. People who can't say, I don't know, or I made a mistake. And, I'm a politician and a lawyer and a husband and a father, so I get to say that every day on one regard or another. And this is a big, big issue. And I don't want people saying 20 years from now, this was a big mistake. Now look what they're making us do, or we don't get the money. I believe wholeheartedly that's going to happen.
Speaker Batchelder, Representative Leader Hurd, thank you very much. The other thing is we don't, I think Bill Gates has been associated with a lot of the Common Core standards. He certainly put hundreds of millions of dollars into promoting the Common Core standards. And he himself said we won't know for 10 years whether this worked or not. Well, when you're rolling something out to 45 states, you might want to have a better idea of whether it's going to work or not. And that's part of the reason why we're putting in the Massachusetts standards as an interim measure, is because we know that they worked. We can look at the track record. Back during President Reagan's administration, he called on me and he said, a nation at risk. We had failed in education. We needed to do something different. Even Ronald Reagan talked about education. But the point was Massachusetts took action, and they did put some standards in place that had a tremendously successful impact. So we're going to have those standards as our interim standards. But I think the analogy of going down the wrong road, that is a concern. One of the things that we don't know when you talk about fiscal responsibility, we don't have any idea what this implementation was going to cost on Common Core itself. That's a multi-billion-dollar hole that we don't even know about. We've heard warnings about that. I certainly live in a rural part of the state. It's not much like Franklin County, actually. But we have certain challenges there because of this testing that's being imposed. Multiple tests. At one point they were considering as many as 10. I think that was lowered down to 7. But you can imagine having to get on a school bus and ride to someplace because you don't have good internet service, and you're going to go there and take your test, and it's going to take a long time, and you're going to have to do that on multiple occasions. Some people projected it was going to be as much as 4 or 5 months of testing and 3 months of teaching, something like that. So that's something, again, that we're looking at. When people say, what about the federal dollars? Well, we've heard from Superintendent Dick Ross that no federal monies will need to be returned in terms of Race to the Top monies. The second part would be, are there other resources available to help us in doing the right thing in education? I suspect we can make those appropriations. There might be money from State Aid Fund or someplace else that we can look at to find those resources. But certainly we want to help Ohio do the right thing in education. And since we've gone down the wrong path, I think it's only fair that some of us could admit we might have done a better job in the last couple of years, or 4 years, or 6 years. But we're looking at this and we think this is the right path going forward. This hearing process will help us discuss that, take testimony on both sides of the issue, and hopefully arrive at the right conclusion.
Mr. Speaker, one final? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think the process that we're engaging in right now is a bit redundant. I think we've been here, done that before, with many of the same players in place that are currently. So I'm a little troubled, and not just during this current administration, but there has been a previous address of this subject that was extremely comprehensive, and I know that because I was part of it. And the exercise was exactly the same as it is right now. The only difference is who are deemed to be the experts in terms of education. And I do not believe that that's something that we will ever come to a determination around in the best interest of the students in the state of Ohio, as long as that becomes or remains a political dynamic. And that is exactly the exercise that we've been engaged in for certainly the last 8 years that I've been a legislator. Certainly since Durant was handed down, we've been unresponsive to that. So I would propose, if we are going to yet again undertake this conversation of education, and sincerely have the interest of our students going forward, and obviously the state, because there's nothing more important to the success of our state than any part if we fail with education. And that would be to put together a legitimate, bipartisan council on education to address this comprehensively and have a bipartisan solution and supported vote for this. Because I believe that's the only way that we're going to have anything that stays in place long enough to be of benefit and service to the students. We can do a number of things that serve us as legislators and politicians, but at the end of the day, this really is about educating our future citizens here, and as long as we fail, we all fail ultimately. So, thank you, gentlemen, for your time.